We're talking about bringing the best-in-class AI to every last citizen of India. I know the people in this room probably want AI to solve the problem of traffic. People in Bombay probably want to solve for the problem of infrastructure. People in Delhi probably that of pollution. But the idea is to solve for 1.4 billion people in this country. And Saumer, if I could kick things off with you about how we can ensure that the AI being built in India is relevant for every last person, irrespective of where they are in Kashmir or in Kanyakumari, in a big city, no matter what language they speak, what location they're at. How do we ensure it is inclusive?
I think, Ritu, great start to the discussion and follow on from the previous one. I think if you look at it as 1.4 billion people, India is a country with multiple dialects, multiple languages. So making sure that we have data sets and intelligent data available for each of those local languages, I think is the key one to work with it. The second thing that you talk about is it has to be indigenous. I mean, the problems that we deal with today, like a traffic conversation or ordering something, is very different from the US. So you need Indic models that rely on the local data, and that probably will make it more pervasive from a broader citizenship perspective. Last but not the least, I think skilling is important. Doesn't matter how easy you make it, how far it goes. End of the day, at different levels of skills, getting the citizens to understand how easily they can use the intelligence out of AI, that is what is going to make it pervasive for the citizens of the country. Well,
since you brought up languages, Subram, let me toss it to you, because at Google Cloud, tell us, for instance, if we speak about languages, every 100 kilometers here, the dialect changes. And I think in that way, India is a very unique country. It is both a strength and also a challenge for building digital tools. Tell us how the non-English speaking population, when you're solving for them, what sort of technologies are you building to solve for that? How is Google's Gemini going to play a role in it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. So we have been working on languages specifically in addressing many of the differences in India in a fundamental way. So to build models and to train models on different data sets, that represents just not only the language diversity, but also the gender, ethnicity, as well as the socio-economic strata that we have in India, became a uber problem for us, right? Really actually have that represented in not only Gemini models, across all properties of Google, was the main issue. So even before the generative AI became a big thing for us about 10 years ago, even before that, we were kind of working on developing solutions specifically addressing that, right? To make sure, to your point on inclusivity, this was a very important element for us. This is how you target the next billion people. Then came Gen AI, where there is a notion of how, as you were mentioning about the inclusivity brought about by data sets. That's precisely what we did. Because Google is a very consumer-facing set of applications. There are 9 different products of Google that touches more than 1 billion people each. Yeah. And that kind of gives you an idea of how easy for us to get the necessary data. And that data became sort of the input into training many of our models, including Gemini. So today, when we talk about Hindi or English or Hinglish or mixing multiple languages with emotions and stuff like that, out of the box, the accuracy levels are just mind-boggling. The moment you start training them further to your domain or to your own respective enterprise data, the accuracy levels improves dramatically. And that's how when we talk about agents that we released some time ago, which are like the customer service agents for the call center or data agents, etc., the ability for the models to interact with people with the same kind of emotions, same different languages mixing in the way that the customers are speaking, has become sort of uncanny for us. So it's more on training and the models that has the data sets access that gave us that.
So would you say India's diversity, especially linguistic, is more of a challenge or an opportunity at this point?
Great opportunity. You solve for India, you solve for the world.
Well, it is a large market and the most populous one at that to solve for. But Anup, let me quickly bring you in, because at Big Basket, you're serving millions of customers, not just here in Bengaluru. I know many of them here, but to large parts of India in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. How are you using the AI tools to ensure that the products or the services that you're delivering are, sort of universal across a person sitting here in Bengaluru or perhaps sitting in Bikaner?
Yeah, so thanks for having me here. So when you talk about inclusive AI, so not about just a linguistic thing, like it's more about how people can access your platform. So when you talk about AI, we are trying to integrate AI in multiple aspects in our system. So starting from the customer service or optimizing our supply chain or inventory and all those things. So one specific thing like which I would like to speak about impact for India, which we tried long before this AI hype, is that we tried building self-checkout stores specifically for India. So if you look about self-checkout stores, the most of the tech out there in the market is quite expensive. You need multiple hardwares in the store which will track the human and the object, and then you do the checkout. So instead, we tried a similar frugal model where we build a simple self-checkout system that works on computer vision and which we train products on it. So we have trained around 10,000 FMCG SKUs and around 250 fruits and vegetables. So a typical store where customers can walk in and do their checkout by themselves. But the whole product we approach in a way of more Indian, like we took the inspiration from an ATM machine, how a checkout counter, the interface and everything looks like an ATM machine. And the AI helped us to track the products, what customer is purchasing. And the whole experience is seamless where we try to integrate. This is way before what we're talking about the AI thing. So we have a lot of emphasis of using AI in multiple. And this kind of stores we're going to expand to smaller cities, tier 3, tier 4 cities, where customers can easily come in and purchase things by themselves. Yeah.
So are you setting up these self-checkout stores in tier 3, tier 4 cities? I mean, do you plan on doing that?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You think people are open to or trusting of these kind of systems yet?
No, if you look at our data, things are surprising. We feel that as a country like India, the element of trust is, we feel like there's some issue around it, but if you look at the data, it's not that the case. Like people are not here for steal everything. You will find some cases, but still self-checkout stuff will work in India for sure. But the thing is that it should be optimized for your ROA. Like you cannot invest a lot for that, because that's where, like when you're talking about AI for India, the ROA piece is quite important.
Well, the element of trust is very important when we talk about AI. And as people that are building this technology, how do you build in safety and security features to ensure that that trust is not broken? Because it's difficult to regain that. Because, even this day and age, when, something like a UPI is so common. This morning, our Uber driver said that, it's something he's not very comfortable using. He'd still, have to go to an ATM to withdraw cash. It was surprising to hear that in Bangalore, so I'm sure it's not a one-off problem. How do you solve for that problem of trust, and how do you ensure privacy and security of data?
So I think Intel being Intel, right? So I think the first thing we talk about in privacy and security, we try to build technologies within the platform, because the general rule of thumb is the closer it is to hardware, the better it is. So we build things like what is called software-guarded extensions or trusted execution technology. Those are technologies we build in, and they're pervasive right from your hand, the PC device, right to the data center. But that's like level 1, okay? I think as you talk about data or privacy, it's an individual level conversation. Yeah. To make that real, right, you have to make sure that the capabilities available are closer to the end user, to you or to me or to Anup for that matter, right, for anybody there. So what we really need to do is build this AI-centric capabilities closer and closer to a device. We as Intel right now believe it is a PC, which is why we're introducing some of the capabilities there. We call it an AI PC, but I'm sure at some time it may come to the phone, what have you, right? So building a system-level capabilities is number 2 you really need to think about, right? Now, the third thing that all of us should be aware of is, we need to play to India's strengths, okay? There's a reason why, in general, when you talk about telco networks or you talk about operating systems, things like Linux and common purpose servers have been long-lasting. So I think as Intel, and I think in general, India has one of the largest contributors to open source ecosystem. So we should be embracing open, because that's what is citizen scale. You can't really work on citizen scale with closed systems. So being open, being contributing, leverage from one another. As I said, Linux is a great example of how a secure OS is, right? Number 3. Last but not least, and you talk citizen scale. People say it's 1% error or 2% error. 1% is huge, right? What is our strength? Our strength are the people. We really need to bring up a human, in the loop when you do this flow. So it is very good learning for us because we work also in the use cases. When you're working with some of the media houses, I will not take the names because I don't want to make it public as yet, but you talk to media houses when we went with that. And our previous panel talked about the amount of data sets that they have, right? Getting a human into the flow is not hard, and it still uses AI. But you can get up to 99 point, no, whatever 59 SLAs or 69 SLAs. Building that strength, I think, is an important piece. So capabilities, systems closer to the user, open source, and human in the loop. That, I think, is what's required for India to make sure we can really do citizen scale at a cost that's affordable.
Subram, you wanted to add on?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of add on. These are great points. There is a level of, controls that we want to bring in on top of the hardware itself at the platform layer. Yeah. So if you think about privacy and security, they have been growing or evolving sort of symbiotically as well as the LLMs themselves, GenAI. Particularly because, when we talk about platforms, we talk about data encryption, access control, threat management, all of that very, very well. But the moment you go to generative AI, how do you make sure that the data that is used in these models are fairly safe? Right? That is where the DLP comes in, redaction of personal data, and creating what we call as a data clean rooms, which allows people to use their data sets in a GenAI context in a manner that PII data is completely avoided. And that is on one side in terms of the controls. And then on top of it, you got to have models that are explaining themselves how they made the decisions. This is where the explainability comes in, right? And transparency of what this is all about. Today, when you talk about well-behaved models, they come with a specification. We call it as model card. You might have heard about it, right? The model tells what this is supposed to be, what data it was trained on, what are the guardrails, and what is the limitations of it, etc. Allowing, if you are a developer or a consumer of that application, of that model, allows you to kind of selectively choose based on your security thresholds. So both security and privacy need to be taken, together, yeah, along with the platform the platform level, controls that we have in place. You need to have the hardware as well.
Well, security is one obviously very important aspect of it, but the other equally important is sustainability. Even something as simple as using perhaps ChatGPT to, make an itinerary for a vacation you may or may not even take. All these data centers that house these AI servers, they use gallons of water, they use rare minerals, there's a lot of electronic waste they produce. So, how do you approach that aspect of sustainability from the get-go, from the start of business, building your models?
Well, there is a fair bit. This is a great point because with the level of changes that is happening at the hardware level, yeah, hardware layer, you could definitely see you break the power envelope at all levels easily, right? Level of compute demand is such. Since 2008, we have been carbon neutral. So in other words, we have been consuming as much electricity as we generate. And there are aspirations to get carbon zero within the next 10 years and so on. And the idea is that while you look at Google for what it is in terms of the Google Play or Google Chromebook or Google Cloud, etc., or generative AI, Gemini, etc., there is a vast set of research that is going on primarily to tackle the problem that you just mentioned. How do you minimize the carbon footprint? How do you minimize the power consumption and make use of more sustainable resources, right? So today, if you are a consumer of Google Cloud, particularly in the generative AI, in the console itself, you have the capability to really assess how much energy you are consuming for your workload and optionally choose alternative hardware platforms with a little bit of compromise on either latency or performance, etc. So depending on your sustainability thresholds, you should be in a position to choose the right kind of platform, right? This is the starting point. Yeah. To even measure where you are, what you are consuming, etc. And then you start to get to how you can really bring back the sustainability.
Well, go on.
I think we play this sustainability conversation very softly, if I may say so. I personally equate it to the credit card crisis. Because when in US people are using credit, nobody realized what it would land into in 2008. To me, sustainability is a very similar problem. We are very underplaying it a lot, but I think we need to look at it very differently. I mean, since we come from the silicon world, the way the silicon designs are happening or system designs are happening, very soon we are hitting power envelopes that are non-sustainable. So I think fundamentally, I mean, we can talk about frugal AI or what have you. Fundamentally, data center design, liquid cooling technology or whatever technologies we need to do to cool. But more importantly, users need to be aware of this conversation that in a country like India, where population is still exploding and usage is going to explode, it needs a fundamental rethink from a government policy perspective. What does sustainability mean? Because we are underplaying it a lot right now.
Well, I hope you at Big Basket, Anup, are not underplaying it, because the food sector, a third of the global greenhouse gases. Just tell us how you're using some of the AI tools available to you to ensure, whether that is product expiry, the movement of goods, etc. How are you ensuring sustainable practices into your everyday business?
Yeah, I think as an organization, we do multiple initiatives towards sustainability, like the way we generate, way we generate the solar power or the electric vehicle fleets for deliveries. But one aspect which has a lot of AI impact into it is the way we have our predictive system for our demand. We have a system, AI system, which predicts the demand in certain areas, like on around a dark store, and it can auto indent orders to the warehouses. So after moving to this model, the food wastage drastically reduced. Like there are issues when especially FMCG and perishable goods get spoiled if it's over ordered. So these kind of techniques have actually saved a lot of food wastage in our system. So it's working really well.
Well, Saumer, I'll jump from sustainability to the other big issue when we talk about AI, and that is ethical AI. Often it faces this criticism of biases and, the sort of decision making. How do you go about, for the people in this room that are perhaps building on some of these models, how do you ensure that the data is trained for India, it is fair, and it is reflective of our diversity?
So I think a couple of parts to it, Ritu. I think the first part is, if you want to do accuracy, you really need to be able to have the fastest path to get to the most accurate data in this ocean of data we have, right? The answer to that question, we believe, the roadmap to that is getting it closer and closer to the user and have that human loop, as I talked about, because that's the best way of kind of ensuring that conversation, number one. The second thing is, the previous panel touched upon it, right? When you want to train models and you want to, get fairly accurate, you really want the models to have specialized data, so that you're really working with a data set that I think the Google team also talked about it, because as they call about a model card, because if you do that, you can't guarantee it, but you get closer and closer to a situation of saying, yes, it's fairly accurate to the extent that citizen scale is possible. So getting it closer to the user, getting the human loop, and talking about pre-trained, pre-validated data at the starting point are probably some of the things that would help us get closer to what we are talking about here.
Well, Subram, if you'd want to add to that, and also as we scale for a population as large as that we have in India, how do you solve for the problem of not just it being effective and inclusive, but also affordable at scale?
Yeah, so I'll answer. I wanted to kind of add on to what was mentioned earlier. There is an element of how you remove or reduce bias by improving the accuracy, even after you really get to a point where the inferences are done. This is all grounding principles, right? So you can either ground the data on internet or you can ground it based on your enterprise data. The ability for the model to really constrain itself to the data set that it is really working on allows you to define the level of accuracy. So today, when you are using Gemini, for example, it cites where it got the data from. So there is no reason for you to really wonder, hey, is it hallucinating or is there a bias, etc. As long as the data sources are fairly accurate in nature, you can ground it based on your enterprise data. That is the reason why we are seeing, if I were to really look back at our journey of generative AI in, phase 2, for the past 3 years that is, this year particularly the enterprise adoption of generative AI solutions in the form of solutions has been just dramatic. It's day and night. And this is one of the main reasons. People are able to place much more trust. The answer to your second question is about the cost
affordability and scalability.
Yeah, the cost aspect of it, right? And it gets built in multiple levels. A part of that comes from platform providers, hardware platform providers like Intel, where you have affordable processors that is being created, etc. And the selective nature of how you can use the workload to write platform plays a big role. For example, training would require certain type of hardware. Inference would require a different type of hardware at a much lower cost. The ability for a platform such that of, say, Vertex AI in Google, which allows you to choose the right platform for the right task, is very critical in really achieving the right ROI. The second is about building the flexibility to choose the right models. Not all problems need to be solved by one big Gemini, one big cloud, etc. There are a lot of smaller models as well.
Yeah.
So the ability to build that flexibility is brought about by many of the software frameworks like JAX or XLA or PyTorch, TensorFlow. There's many of them that is open, which masks the heterogeneity that is there inherently in the system and provides a level of agnosticity, so to say, and gives that flexibility. That also drives a tremendous amount of cost benefit.
All right, since we have the last couple of minutes to just take a longer term view, Saumer, if I could start with you. In the next 3 to 5 years, what would you like to see from a public point of view, from a policy point of view, and from the private companies to ensure AI truly emerges as this tool for empowerment for every last Indian?
I think essentially we all talked about the importance of data, right? I think we need to be able to utilize the data that we have, and we talked about across the panels today, monetize the data, keep it private secure, so it makes it useful for the citizen scale that we're talking about. That's kind of one thing we have. The second thing we really need to be able to talk about is when you use data, I think Google, my Subram touched upon it, right? You could have different models for different data sets. The reality of the conversation when you talk about cost is these models work with different impedances, okay? Where's the data engineering solution that would lie on top of it to make it, really a cost-effective solution? I'll give you a very specific example. We have been working with Bhashini, and we published this in the Honorable Prime Minister's speech was real-time translated in Malayalam for the broadcasting, right? It has a speech-to-text, a text-to-text, and a text-to-speech, 3 different models. Now, the question was not about whether these models work or not work. The question was about saying, how do you make a solution engineering to put this 3 together so that the end user, with everything doesn't need to lie on your accelerator. How do you make it to the end user so that they get a right outcome and correct, accurate translation? And you can extend this. Think about it. What is Bhashini useful for? One of the most use cases I'm very passionate about is, can I take it to the most remotest classroom? For a student, a primary year student, to have not be impeded by language requirement but get the best education. To me, it means that you need to have a very small device, accessible remotely, real time, that somebody in IIT can be sending that message for.
Yeah.
How does that work? You have to have a cost-effective platform, as he talks about. But talking about the use cases, talking about the platform, generating the right TCO, but focusing on monetizing and scaling for the data, I think are the elements that we as the government of India, and that's what policy should be about.
Yeah.
Government should focus on, if I want to do citizen scale, what does it mean? Right? How can I take it to remote places? That's what I would request the government to have and all of us to think about.
Well, on that note, Anup, last 30 seconds, your closing thoughts.
No, I think it's all about everyone talking about large language model for everything. But in my opinion, for smaller tasks, we should focus on smaller models, which is much more cost effective. Like a country like India, we focus on ROI. So if you focus on the combination of small models and then try to solve problems, it will be much more sustainable.
All right. On that note, yes.
The last 30 seconds, on public, private, as well as citizens. From public, it's about defining the right kind of policy, guidelines, etc., promoting the SMB and the incubation as well as the innovation centers. From the private sector, focus more on security and privacy and making sure industry-specific applications. And from citizens, be lifelong learners.
Well, I know the audience had some questions, but we'll leave that for an offline conversation later. Subram, Saumer and Anup, all three of you, thank you very much for candidly answering all of our questions here. Thank you. Thank you for your time.